Hello, class. This week we are looking at chapter 12, section 3. We're discussing the Mongol Empire. So last week we were looking at Genghis Khan and how Genghis Khan um, went on a huge expansion of his empire, the largest empire we'd ever seen. This week we are looking at Kublai Khan's conquest as well. So we are starting to see Kublai Khan, who is related to Genghis. We're also going to look at the Mongol rule specifically in China. And number three is we're going to explain how the Mongols end up falling. So we're going to have the end of this empire. It's sort of a short empire. Kublai Khan is the grandson of Genghis Khan. Now, we discussed Genghis Khan last week. He ends up becoming the Great Khan in 1260, and one of the first thing that Kublai Khan does is he conquers all of China. This is a big deal. The reason why this is a big deal is that China has so far in history been very good at protecting themselves from conquerors. This is the first time that someone comes into China and is able to conquer all of China. That happens in 1279. When Kublai Khan ends up conquering China, he declares the Yuan dynasty. So he's a new dynasty. And during this dynasty, we actually do see peace and prosperity. The reason why we see peace and prosperity is because Kublai Khan tries to adopt Chinese culture and Chinese ways. We also see during this time that the capital is now built at Beijing. Beijing is still the capital of China today. Now, so far, every time the Mongols have tried to conquer an area, they have won. But it is important to note that Kublai Khan actually tries to conquer Japan. But the difference with Japan is a set of islands. And the Mongols, they're most known for their land attacks. So when he goes and takes a fleet to Japan to try and conquer, Kublai actually fails. There's a second invasion, but again, it fails by a massive typhoon. So it's not necessarily even the Japanese fighting back. It's a typhoon, the weather, that is basically making it impossible for the Mongols to invade Japan. Going back to how Kublai Khan is able to rule over the Chinese. Now remember, the Chinese are a very proud people and they're very proud of their culture. They are not going to take being ruled by a nomadic tribe very easily. Kublai Khan is very smart in how he rules China, though. First of all, he sort of keeps Mongols' lives separate from the Chinese. And the Mongols actually follow different laws than the Chinese. He also keeps the top government posts, giving them to both Mongols or foreigners. And he puts the Chinese in charge of local positions. What this means is that the Chinese do not have authority in the government. The reason why Mongols are giving this to foreigners or to other Mongols is Kublai Khan can trust them more. The foreigners do not have any local Chinese influence, and therefore they would be more loyal to Kublai Khan. But even though Kublai Khan doesn't really give a lot of power to the Chinese in the government, he does do things to improve China. And one thing that is noted is he builds a grand canal to Beijing. He also is building a highway. So he's improving things in China that will improve their trade and their economy. Another thing that is important to note at this time is we still have the Silk Road. So Kublai Khan still continues to have trade between the Middle East, the Arab Peninsula, and Europe. Another thing that we need to note during Kublai Khan's reign is we have a special traveler from Western Europe coming to visit, Marco Polo. He is a Venetian trader, he's from Italy, and he visits China in 1275. Now, the reason why we're noting Marco Polo is Marco Polo ends up bringing a lot of different Chinese inventions as well as Chinese stories back to Italy. And all of a sudden in Western Europe, we have this curiosity about Asia and about China. So when he returns in 1292, he ends up telling stories about what he's seeing in China. If we were to think of Western culture at this time, it's going to be very different than what's happening in China. So he's sort of raving about the amazing cities that China has and the wealth. He also brings back these black stones, which is coal that the Chinese used to heat their homes. So this is sort of the start of even further trade and economy. Kublai Khan's government also is really promoting trade, as we said before, with the Silk Road. So all these stories that Marco Polo brings back to Italy, they end up gathering in a book. But again, we're not completely true. These are stories. We're not true on what's actually truth and what is not. What's just sort of myths or legends. Ultimately, the Mongol Empire does not last very long. It ends up declining in power quite quickly. So first of all, they start trying to lead more conquests and expand their land. Now, if you remember, the Mongols had the largest emperor anyone had seen. And they get a little greedy. They try to expand to Southeast Asia, and it actually ends up weakening their whole empire. They also start to tax the people, and too many high taxes causes a lot of anger and resentment from people. Eventually, we see that the Yuan dynasty is overthrown. Kublai dies in 1294, and everyone that comes after Kublai is weak. They're not strong leaders like Kublai Khan. In the 1300s, we have many rebellions breaking out in China. Remember, the Chinese didn't necessarily like that this nomadic group came and took over their land. So, of course, when they see that there are weak leaders, they're going to take that opportunity and rebel against them. They end up overthrowing the Yuan dynasty and they establish a new dynasty called the Ming dynasty. Later on, we see the Mongol rule collapsing in Persia in 1330. This is when we start to see those Turks coming back. In Central Asia, it's 1370s, and by the end of the 1300s, only the Mongols rule in Russia, and this is the Golden Horde. So if we were to look at this dynasties in China, okay, you can sort of see we have Genghis Khan invading, Marco Polo reaches China, and we have a short Yuan or Mongol dynasty right here. I want you to write down 2 questions now. The first one is, what made Kublai Khan a good leader? How was he able to rule China? Your second question is, how does the Mongol Empire decline? What is the end of the Mongol Empire? You have to write these down with your notes. I will check them on Thursday.